The U.S. economy and financial system is the leader globally in laundering dirty money. I said to this wonderful group, let's pretend there's a big red button up here on the lectern, and if you push that button, you can stop all hard narcotics trafficking tomorrow. Who here will push the button? And out of 100 people dedicated to evolving our society spiritually, guess how many would push the button?
I don't know.
1.
You suggested the control grid is in part designed to manage the population.
So if you want to move people to a much lower economic footprint, having complete control is obviously very convenient.
Okay, so the bottom line is the majority is about to get a lot poorer.
So the question is, where's all this money going? And one of the things I've looked at is the underground base and city infrastructure and transportation system that's been built.
What would be the purpose?
I think if you're worried about a near extinction event,
So thank you for doing this. I know you worked on this for years, but you get the sense, if you're just a sort of aware person, that there is a concerted attempt by governments around the world to digitize commerce and to digitize currency and to basically control people through money.
correct.
That's correct. Okay, so that was my first question. Is this happening? Am I imagining it?
It's absolutely happening. And what's important to understand, it's been happening for a long time. In other words, this is like an invisible corral that they've been building around you for a long, long time. Because how do a few sneak up on the many? Well, you have to do it very quietly and visibly before you throw the trap.
Smart.
So essentially what they're building, because it's converting a currency system into a control system. So it's really the end of currency. And what they're doing is they've been building the different digital pieces. And when it integrates and comes together, then you literally have a digital concentration camp. It's complete and utter control.
Otherwise known as the world.
Here's the thing to understand. You and I grew up in a world where there was mass media, where you were pitching stories. So you had 57 varieties of ice cream and you're pitching them to 57 different niches, but you're still pitching to mass audiences. What we're talking about is a system where you can surveil, control, and influence one person at a time. And with AI and software, each person can have their custom surveillance, influence, nudging, and control system.
And punishment.
Yes. Enforcement.
Because ultimately, if you control money, you can starve people to death. You can kill them.
Right. So go back and think of the pandemic. So if I say you can't go more than a mile from your home, and I say you have to be mandated a pharmaceutical, then if you don't take the pharmaceutical, I can turn off your money. If you go more than a mile away from your home, your money and your credit cards won't work. So, whatever rules I lay down, there's a wonderful example. The head of the Bank of International Settlements is the central bank of central banks. And it's been running the process to implement basically an all-digital monetary system. And they have innovation hubs all over the world. They've been running this process for a long time. And in 2020, when the pandemic started, or it was October 2020, so the pandemic was underway, the general manager of the Bank of International Settlements was on an IMF panel. And in 1 minute, it's the first time in my life I ever saw a central banker tell the truth. I fell off my chair. And he said, the beauty of this is we can set the rules on how your money works, and we have the technology to enforce them. And what he was saying is literally from one place in, anywhere in the world where the technology exists, you can track each person individually. You can set a complex list of rules, like legislation, regulation, and administrative policy, and you can enforce them all with the technology with AI and software. So have you ever seen, there's a wonderful movie called The Lives of Others about the German Stasi and surveillance. It's about a group of artists and sort of creative, talented people who are under surveillance by the German Stasi. And you see what it's like to be under surveillance for 24/7. Think of each one of us. We're all under surveillance, not just by governments, but by corporations who are trying to do something. And it may not be anything nefarious. So 80 different companies are trying to sell you something, or 80 different companies are trying to get your data for some reason. And so they have AI and software bots that track you and follow you and learn from you and try and influence what you do, because they're trying to extract some kind of value from you. And literally, think of, being attacked by a swarm of bees. We're surrounded now by a swarm of AI software bots, all trying to learn from us, extract something from us, or get us to do something. Now, when you go to an all-digital system, then there's no escape. And then they can start literally to enforce rules. They do now. So
what are the manifestations of this that maybe we're not paying attention to or don't perceive for what they are?
So look at what they did to the Canadian truckers. We don't like what you're doing. We cut off your money, and we cut off your friend's money. And if people help you, we cut off their money too. So I've known so many different people around the country who've been debanked. We just got legislation passed in Tennessee that a bank over a certain size couldn't debank someone for political or religious reasons. And you're one of the things that's happening.
There's no such federal law.
Not that I know of, but I haven't looked. I've been working with the states because ultimately the one power currently under the Constitution in the United States that can stop this, the powers not delegated to the federal government by the states are reserved to the states. In other words, the states are technically more powerful than the federal government. And under the Constitution, they have the power to override the federal government on many different issues, including healthcare. And so one of the tensions we see in America is more and more there is a debate between the feds and the states about who has what power. So we've seen a lot of the conservative AGs and treasurers pushing back in a wonderful way, in a marvelous way. The challenge they have is this, and this was said to me by a senator in Northern Ohio. Northern Ohio has one of the best groups of sort of freedom-fighting legislators in the country. And as you probably know, because you know Montana, it's very beautiful. And
you talk about Montana?
Idaho.
Idaho. Okay.
So, but it's right, it's right next to Montana. So one of the Idaho senators said to me, he said, my problem, every time I fight to implement the Constitution, he said, what I learn is every year we send $1 to Washington, and every year Washington sends back $1.19. And when I say I want to implement the Constitution, my constituents say to me, I'd rather have the 19 cents.
Yeah.
So what we've been watching literally since World War II is the federal government and a very, largesse, both monetary and fiscal policy, buying people out of the Constitution. And buying the whole the federal government is right now operating so far outside the law. It's, you know how unbelievable it is. So that's the challenge before us. If we want to be free, we're going to have to decide we're not going to let ourselves be, it's like being sort of walked into the slaughterhouse. We're not going to walk into the slaughterhouse. But you don't even, I guess what bothers me about it, there's something wonderfully straightforward, horrifying, but wonderfully straightforward about just a conventional invasion where people show up with guns and tell you what to do, because at least you know who the enemy is. But there's something very scary in an insidious way about being lulled into slavery. Right. And the thing to understand about the lulling is the marketing plan works one person at a time. In other words, you I buy with money. Your friend I buy by knocking them off. For the other, your other friend I get a control file on. So there are thousands of different ways of nudging, buying carrots and sticks to get everybody into the control, into the trap. And what is so insidious about this is much of the marketing plan is invisible, and it really is crafted one by one. The odds seem overwhelming against the average person in a system that you just described. So how far are we from not being able to exercise constitutional freedoms? So I don't know how many years. They're clearly pushing to have this done by 2030. And, what I do have to say is if you look at what it takes to stop it, I believe they're going to fail. Now, what I don't underestimate is how much damage they could do. And the failure may not come in time to save America. So
if we could just stop and define terms, who's they?
The central bankers.
Yes.
Right. So we have a democratic republic, or we have a republic and use this democratic process. What happened in 1913 is the bankers took control of monetary policy. What they're trying to do now is take control of fiscal policy. Once they get control of fiscal policy, it's going to be much harder to reverse it.
Can you, I'm going to ask a series of really dumb questions.
Okay.
I hope you'll indulge me. What's the difference?
Taxation without representation.
But between fiscal and monetary policies?
Okay. Monetary policy is I control the process by which currency is issued, including through credit.
Yeah.
So I generally govern and control credit issuance.
Yes.
And from that, the currency, the creation and management of the currency. Fiscal policy is when I control the taxes and the borrowing of the U.S. government. Now, because the central bank basically operates the borrowing, it's the borrowing is shared. But this comes down as this is the Boston Tea Party moment. Can they tax without representation? So I'll give you a little story. During the Biden administration, Biden nominated somebody for control of currency who was ultimately not approved. The Republicans in the Senate killed the nomination. Before she was nominated, 3 weeks before, she wrote an article in the Vanderbilt Law Review that said the great thing about central bank digital currency, in other words, an all digital currency system, is you have the perfect tool to deal with inflation. If inflation gets out of hand, you just freeze everybody's bank accounts.
Nice.
Right. So so